Okay, you're live.
Good morning. Today is May 14th. This is the monthly meeting of the Financial Advisory Commission. This is Chair Jim Cardillo. I'm joined by Commission members Ross Arnett, Joe Rubino, Peter Vale, and Ed Meehan. We're also joined by representatives from the city's finance department, Joel Palical, Sean Doyle, Kat Valiente, from City Annapolis TV, Madeline Harrell, and from the Office of Law, Miss Ashley Leonard. Members of the city council present, Alderman Thorpe. And I think I've covered everybody. Thank you. On our agenda, the next item is to review and approve the agenda. If I could have commission members please review and approve the agenda.
Move to approve.
A motion by Mr. Meehan.
Yep.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Arnett. All in favor of the agenda as submitted, signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. For the next section, reports, we will go briefly on finance department. I do not see anyone from the city manager's office. So I will start with,
Do you want to do minutes?
oh, thank you. Thank you. I apologize. Skipped ahead. Okay, so the April meeting was held without proper notification of the agenda, without proper posting of the agenda with sufficient time. Therefore, any actions that were taken in the April meeting, which include the approval of the March 19 minutes, need to be re-voted upon. So I've recirculated the March 19 minutes, and I would like to entertain a motion for amendments or approval.
Move approval.
Motion by Mr. Arnett, seconded by Mr. Meehan. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Now, I apologize. Now we will move on to finance department report.
Great. Thank you very much, Chairman Cardillo. Our report will be brief from the perspective that we've been highly focused on the budget. We had the special meeting earlier this week where we were responsive to questions. We provided some additional responses over email, and I wanted to just review some of those just to bring those forward. And then just address any other open items that maybe resulted from that. Outside of that, though, just before jumping back into budget questions, the general status of the finance department is one. I just want to touch on a couple of things. We continue to move to a position of stability. Hiring within the finance department continues to stabilize. We have a office manager who will be coming in more as a strategic operations lead to oversee the accounts receivable, accounts payable type departments, and general office management starting, I believe, next Thursday. Mr. Doyle can correct me if I'm wrong on that date. It might be next Thursday or the following Thursday after that. And then we also have some additional billing team vacancies that are being worked on, and there's continuation in the finance director search. I don't have an update there. I would defer to the city manager to give an update there in the future. Outside of that, though, the team continues to grow. Something that I believe I've reported on in the past is that there was a significant effort to create durability and resilience within the department by creating standard operating procedures across the team. We have developed in excess of 80 individual standing operating procedures for the team to develop some of that resilience and sustainability in the event of turnover in the future. And so just want to report out to this committee that significant effort and really successful initiatives have been undertaken and executed within the finance department outside of just day-to-day operations. And so significant strengthening has occurred. And with that being said, as a result, I will be actually taking some steps back as the acting finance director. The and Sean Doyle, Mr. Doyle, will be stepping up as the primary point of contact for the FAC going forward. We will be reducing our overall consultancy to the city of Annapolis, just overall, in an effort to just reduce, as the city does no longer needs us as much, we will be titrating down. And but I will continue to be here in an advisory aspect to provide services and see the budget through and continue to provide support to Mr. Doyle, but Mr. Doyle will provide services. There hasn't been any formal changeover in the titles or anything like that. That's still to come, more to come on that. But this will be the last meeting that I'm serving as the primary position. So I just wanted to bring everyone forward on where we are in the finance department. So that's probably the general largest update for us, but really good news, just really positive developments. But outside of that, probably want to just shift to the budget discussion. I'll pause there if there's any discussion or questions. Mr. Arnett?
Okay, Russ, yeah.
Yes, two things, Mr. Chair. One, I don't see an email from you, Joel, responding to our questions. I don't know if I got dropped off the list or what, but I'd like to get those remarks or comments or answer, whatever they were.
Sorry, I just sent it straight to Mr. Cardillo. That was my mistake. I misspoke.
Oh, I'm sorry, I failed to circulate that.
I
We can bring
believe
that. I think Peter got it for
Ross
you.
and Joe, I forwarded them to you last night.
Oh, okay. I don't see it.
Joel, from me, 2 questions and a comment. First, thank you for the value-added component in your work as interim finance director. That's very valuable and very much appreciated. I think it puts the city on sounder footing than when you arrived. 2 questions. First, is there a person in the role of budget director right now?
No, I've been serving as the interim budget director as well. And so I will continue in that capacity and supporting the city. I will, and so I'm not going anywhere. I'm just not going to be billing at the same level that I've been billing at in an effort to just the city no longer needs me at the level.
In the acting finance director role. Okay, thank you. And then secondly, do you believe that you have resources in place for a timely year-end close, which, if I look, is 45 days away?
Yes, I think that Deputy Director Karen Ajayi has been a very, very significant hire for the city of Annapolis. She has to come in and very much established protocol. The team is driving forward towards closing. Alderman Thorpe has really established a strong audit committee presence. We have really reconstituted the audit committee and built a strong framework against which to operate against. We've been in strong discussions with the auditor around what the protocol should be, what the ideal timeline should be. Mr. Doyle has been actively working with the team. So just to give you guys additional flavor, I mean, the SOPs were just part of the strengthening and the resilience protocol, but what we've shifted to is weekly departmental meeting, weekly intra-departmental meetings within individual groups. We discuss things, the approval timelines, all of the performance metrics around the finance department have been improving dramatically as a result of just a lot more governance and just structure. And so working on those closed timelines has become a very strong focal point for the finance department. And so while I can't sit here and guarantee that we're going to close at exactly 45 days, considering our exact where we were, I think we've strengthened significantly to work towards that timeline.
Thank you. Thank you. It's very encouraging. Any other questions or comments from anyone with regards to the finance department report? Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on, I'll turn to audit committee, and if I can get an update from Mr. Rubino.
Yeah, so a lot of the folks on the audit committee are also doing a lot of the heavy lifting for wrapping up the budget. So there was a planned audit committee meeting for next week that's going to be postponed to June. Simultaneously with wrapping up the budget, audit committee is also looking at metrics and kind of optimizing what they look at and how they're going to look at it, procedures for the future, which I think is a great dialogue. But they're going to postpone that deeper dive and discussion until June so they can focus on that and wrap up the budget and then move on to looking ahead to the future. So I think good things are happening and moving along. And the next meeting now will be in June. Over.
Thank you. Very encouraging. Questions with regard to the audit committee report? Seeing none, moving on to new business. The first, the FAC has been referred to on 3 pieces of legislation. The first is Resolution R1026, which is the annual fees schedule. I sent out the materials with regards to the list of fees. As the fee schedule is prepared for FY27, the simple way to review it is to look for any changes from previous indicated by the red. So Joel, if you have any color to add to the fees schedule, and then to entertain questions from commission members.
Sure. So the fee schedule as a general background is simply just fees that are charged by the city for specific services, or fees that are charged for, say, your water bill, or fees for your usage of sewer or otherwise, or recycling or trash. So it's just the annual amount that is being allocated to residents for specific services. If you want to rent a pickleball court, or if you want to rent, a playground or something to that effect. And so those fees are established annually. They may be adjusted throughout the year, but the changes will, any large sweeping changes, typically, like, say, for example, enterprise fund type changes, will be incorporated at this time. And then if there's any changes from like recs and parks and things, they'll be incorporated as well. So typically it's department led, and we defer to them for most of their judgment, but I'll try to field questions, but would mostly need to point back to them for any specific nuanced questions that will come out of here. Okay.
Thank you. I have a question from Ross.
Yeah, let's see, I'm not muted. And actually, Alderman Thorpe is here, so he can maybe help this. I'm noting on page 17 the increase in the fees for short-term rental inspection, and then a similar increase in fee for the biannual inspection for units that are larger than 50. I've always wondered how we can do the same inspection for rental units that are apartments essentially versus rental units that are short-term rentals. I don't know whether the finance committee discussed the rationale about the difference between these two, but it is significantly different for essentially the same inspection.
Thanks, Alderman Thorpe. A question, Mr. Arnett Ross. Is this an inspection fee or straight license fee? Is there actual work involved in obtaining this license, or is it simply the filing of a license and paying a fee?
So that is a very interesting question. Traditionally, the city has viewed that fees have to be based on the cost of providing the service. So it's always been for the inspection. I'm not sure that is required, but that's how it's been treated. And that's why I'm asking, there's such a large difference, and I'm supportive of it. I'd like to add another 0 to them, but it is starkly different for what is essentially the same inspection. And that's why I'm wondering if discussion has been taken up by the council and the finance committee that this is more than just a fee for the cost of inspections.
Thanks, Alderman Thorpe. Do you have any response to Mr. Arnett's questions?
Sure do, Mr. Chairman. The specific point that Mr. Arnett brings up was not discussed. The 2 focus areas on this were, one, the finance committee has asked the city staff to inform us as to capture all of the costs. To Mr. Arnett's point, Ms. Leonard will tell you that we're seeking to ensure that the fine matches the cost, or the fee matches the cost. And we want to make sure that it captures all the costs so that the cost of the program is not borne by residents who are not involved in the program. The second point of conversation for this one is, should we create a different fee for residents versus non-residents? And I think the sentiment of the Finance Committee is we would walk down that path. Philosophically, we were talking, if the number stayed at 650, we were talking about 700 for non-residents, 600 for residents, kind of thing. But both those things will be discussed in further budget discussions with the City Council. And I would ask Ms. Leonard if she wanted to add anything to that.
No, Alderman Thorpe is accurate. It's basically that I think for years we haven't actually captured the actual costs to do these sorts of services, and there's been a push more this year to sort of adequately reflect staff time and staff expenses to accomplish this, and to also just sort of update things that need to be updated. And Mr. Arnett is correct that we do try to base fees on actual costs, but again, I don't think that's what's been happening for years.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jim, are you looking for a motion to?
Not yet,
Yeah, so I move we recommend approval of the.
not yet. Joe, you have a question?
Just a clarity question. I don't think it's substantive, but at the bottom of page 2 on the 2 live scan, when I look at that, what just wasn't clear to me, when you line out, kind of net the line out and the red, do you still leave the $30 record in the black so that the fees are now $30 plus $20 service please plus $30 record?
I recall asking.
Just something to check. For clarity, I wasn't certain how that netted out.
I recall asking the question. I recall being told it is accurate because they were adding an additional fee, but I'm blanking on what the actual answer is. I think it is that they're adding an additional fee. And so it is there because it's a $20 service fee, $30 record fee, and a $20 card fee.
Okay, it looked a little different the way that was netted out than the other lines.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
think it's an additional fee was added for that one. I remember asking about it, but I am hazy on it because I did update this a month ago. So sorry.
So Joel, calling back to Mr. Arnett's question with regards to the short-term rental license and the 2-year rental operating license, did you cost those out?
No, that's Director Jakubiak brought that forward, and he provided those numbers. And so mostly, again, these are all departmental led. So the one that Mr. Rubino just asked about was from the police department. They provided those updates. The ones that you're asking about for short-term rental or otherwise would have been planning and zoning.
Easy. Okay. So planning and zoning costed those out, and those fees represent the true cost of the license and inspection required.
Correct. And there is a component in those inspections that have some DPW component. And I think, if I recall correctly, I think it was more of the DPW component that had been maybe missing. Like it was maybe the costing had been more accurately reflective of P&Z, but there is some DPW time. So Director Burr and Director Jakubiak got together and updated the costing to be more reflective of all-in cost from the city of Annapolis for those inspections.
Thank you. Any more discussion on R1026? Okay, so now I call the question. Russ, you wanted to make a motion
to recommend approval?
We have a motion to approve R1026 as proposed.
I'll second.
Thank you, Peter. All in favor of approving R1026 indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. That is approved. Moving on to R1126, the fine schedule. Similar to the fee schedule, again, you can see any changes in red. I'll entertain it. I'll open discussion on R 1126. Go ahead, Ross.
So I'm just noting on page 8, significant increase in the fine for barge house violation. Again, I certainly applaud that, but I reviewed all of these fees. There were relatively few changes, and Joel's right, the departments all work on getting this in, and I found no issues with them.
Thank you. In the past, the FAC has not opined on fines, but I am happy to follow the consensus of the committee when it comes to approving or passing on the fines or recommending changes.
So I just have one question,
Go ahead.
and I don't know who might be able to answer. Is what's the benchmark for the fines? How are they determined? What is the evaluation process for any one line? I mean, the only change this year was the house barge violation, and I don't know how many house barges are in Annapolis, but if that was the only one that changed, what was the impetus, and what would be the process for looking at any of these lines and deciding that it needed to be increased or changed? So it's
Yeah,
kind of
I will turn to either Alderman Thorpe or Ross Arnett. Ross being the former
Actually-
council member when the barge issue hit the news.
I
Alderman
think
Thorpe
Ashley
being the-
Leonard might be here to say something, but
Very well.
the council, well, Frank is the alderman. let Frank talk about it.
Thank you, Ross.
Yeah, I'll just give you the sentiment of this year. There's a three-phase program, roughly speaking, generically. The staff submits these, and what you see is the staff submittal. The finance committee spent some significant time on the fine schedule, and there have been amendments proposed to this document based on feedback from the residents. The house barge one was consistent with feedback with the residents, but additionally, there's been amendments to increase the fine for buses parking in the city. The fine is currently $100. The amendment moving forward is that it be moved to $300 in order to become prohibitive. Speaking of 300, there's an amendment to reduce right now the fine to park on a red line. Again, these are amendments, so they're going to the city council. So just for discussion purposes, I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time from the facts perspective discussing them, but just to give you an idea of what's being discussed. The fine is $300 to park on a red line. There's some people who think that's exceptions, it's a little high. And so there's an amendment going forward to change to split out parking on red lines to $300 if you're in a handicap spot or in front of a fire hydrant, otherwise $200. There's also a discrepancy in the amount of fine parking at a no parking sign versus parking on a red curb. So another amendment cleans that up. So I think the city council members, including the finance committee, has done tried to do a little, I wouldn't call it a deep dive, but a deeper dive into making sure that the fines represent the intent, i.e., there was not any discussion about generating revenue as much as creating the behavior that the city would like to create.
And as a follow-up question, Alderman Thorpe, do we have, or does the finance committee review historical trends and quantities over time to see if changes in proposed fines actually create the behavior changes that are desired?
Historically, I would let Mr. Arnett answer that question. I will tell you that I am in talk about deep dive conversations with the director of transportation as to the number of fines given per month per category over a period of time. Um, and how is that trending, so that we're in a position to, it not only affects the amount of the fine, it also affects the amount of money the city spends on enforcement. So there are areas like that that are being looked at. There's a very, very strong uh, initiative to be data driven in these things. I'm really excited about the energy that's going to this, and so there's various areas where it's all about the data, and that doesn't just include fines. Recs and parks and the number of people using Pit Moyer and things like that. Um, and so I think overall, and Mr. Rubino mentioned the focus on performance metrics. They're all tied together in order to take action based on data. In some cases, we don't have the data, so we got to start collecting the data. You'll notice, and I applaud this, in the mayor's budget, the mayor's office creates, I think it's 10 or 11 benchmarks that they're going to start measuring the performance of the specific mayor's office. Those are examples, Peter, of what's going on there.
No, no, that's great. I'm a data guy myself, and I'm just curious. You know, it makes you wonder if you change a number, it's elasticity, and whether or not you get the behavior for changing a fine. So no more house barges. That's what we're intending to do with the changes in this year's fine schedule.
No more abandoned barges, I think.
Yeah.
So Alderman Thorpe, can I summarize and say that the Finance Committee is taking an active role in the area of fines for the next budget cycle, and that is primarily why not many things have changed from the current fines?
I would say yes to the first part of that, and not yes to the second part. I don't think we opined on to the number of changes. Um, uh, there's I don't know that the number of changes proposed by the city is low at one. I mean, we wouldn't expect a significant number. I wouldn't expect a significant number of changes in the fine schedule. For one of the main reasons is this is a long lasting. This has been going on for a long time, and we should we stay focused on any time you change the fine schedule, as easy as it is to change it on this document. It creates quite a chain of effort on the city staff. And so one of the things that the finance committee's talked about, and matter of fact, the city council, and I'm very focused on, is making sure the city staff has the tools to do their job. And the corollary to that is making sure we don't throw a whole bunch of changes at them and then expect them to implement them overnight, which would be impossible for the best of staff. So I don't know that the number here is low or high. I do like the idea that the city council has come forward with resident focused fines, and my hope would be, Mr. Chairman, that this trend continues. So.
Understood. Thank you. Any further discussion on R1126?
I'll make a motion for the fact to recommend to approve.
Second.
Noted. Seconded by Mr. Arnett. All in favor of approval of R1126 indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Moving on to R1226. This is the position classification and pay plan. I'll open discussion on R1226. Joel, do you have any thing to provide in terms of background?
I admittedly am weak on this one, and so this one's typically managed by the city manager and the director of HR, and so I have not been heavily involved, and so I would need more input from there. So I'm sorry to not have better update there.
And as a question for anyone who might be familiar with this document, I am assuming that anything in red is a new addition.
No.
or is that a change?
I believe those are changes. This is not a staffing or a headcount proposal. This
Okay.
is simply the adjustment of current worker pays and classifications.
And these
Go
are
ahead.
and these are current workers? Okay.
These are current positions, be they
Yeah.
filled or unfilled.
No,
And
they're not current positions, they're new position descriptions. And I checked the staffing in the budget. I don't think any of these are new additions to staff. The only one, I didn't check police closely to see the assistant chief of code enforcement, but I know for both finance and planning and zoning, there's no indication in the staffing report, for example, in planning and zoning, of an assistant chief of historic preservation. And so this would be, if those positions are later established and filled, they would have a slot in the class and comp to give them a position and a pay level.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Ed.
sorry, I apologize to all, but previous engagement, I must go do justice at this point. And I will catch up on the remainder of the meeting. Take care, everybody. Hope to
Thanks,
see you
Ed.
soon.
take care.
Bye
Thank
now.
you.
See you soon.
So, Ross, if I'm hearing you say this right, the position exists in the org chart for the organization, like for the planning and zoning, the assistant chief of historic preservation.
So
It does not.
Okay.
So what this effectively is doing is that because we use a step program in the city, right? There's a grade assigned to employees. It's what establishes kind of the comp and pay plan. It assigns kind of a job level. It establishes a pay range. It helps to define for our clarity and for everyone else where they are in their career ladder, and establishes ranges and qualifications required. And so for purposes of being able to then be to then maintain those roles and create the necessary job responsibilities, that's what this is really doing. And so if you look in the budget, you'll see that there are, in some roles, there are multiple headcount per individual role. If and for some situations you can't assign a person within the same role. So for example, in finance, right, this certified payroll specialist, it was a role that didn't fit within, say, accountant 3 or accountant 4, because it needed its own specific qualifications and its own specific type of structure. And so it was created as its own job class at an N13 level. And so because of that, it created a new role. And so if you look at the budget and look at finance department, you'll see that there is a new role at the bottom of the staffing summary. The name is a little mismatched. It says certified payroll manager rather than certified payroll specialist. But that certified payroll manager had 0 positions in fiscal year 26. It has now 1 position for fiscal year 27. And so I think that that's just that's part of the process as we establish the pay plan and getting that ruled. So I think your original question of the reds being new, I think that is an accurate question.
Okay. Yeah. Mr. Palakal, I'm really just trying to understand how I'm supposed to kind of review this and recommend an approval or disapproval. So this is we for this position, which is in the org chart, we do need a new role or a new job code, basically. And we've assigned it as the grade N13. And I wouldn't even begin to know how to validate it, right?
So funny enough, I guess maybe this is wrong thinking, but as acting finance director, I wasn't even heavily involved in the R12 resolution. It was mostly handled by city manager and director of HR. So perhaps the fact shouldn't really have too much of a view on R12, but that's maybe the wrong perspective. I'm not sure, but
No, it's a valid point. In the past, the FAC has not weighed in on R1213 and has disclaimed an opinion.
yeah,
And if that's the conclusion of the committee, then that's the route we'll go. Alderman Thorpe.
Yeah, I would just have, the finance committee didn't spend a lot of time on this either, as compared to going through the budget, as Mr. Polakal was explaining, and looking at positions inside the budget where they're explained. And the reason I raised my hand is this might be an area where the FAC makes a recommendation going forward as to, is this a document and legislation that should get more focus? Arguably, a lot of the discussion that has happened at the Finance Committee amongst the City Council and amendments is applying to the actual budget resolution as compared to this document. And as the FAC looks forward to make recommendations for fiscal year 28 budget, this might be an area where you look at and say, what is the role of the staff, the city council, the finance committee, and the FAC on this document? Because it hasn't gotten a lot of attention across the board that I know of. And
Thank
I
you.
would ask Mr. Polakal what his thoughts are before going forward on
Thank
that.
you. It appears we do need more data to properly opine on this. Go ahead, Joel.
yeah, I would actually just defer that discussion to the acting city manager. I think she would have a view, and perhaps we could even in the future ask the director of HR to guest at the meeting where we discuss this to provide additional color or something to that effect. But because I really particularly didn't have too much in this, it's very technical to the fact that it's managing to the staff and where they sit within the HR system, not very much around execution of the actual business, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It makes sense to me. I mean, if I were looking at this document, I would be trying to understand whether or not a pay grade needed to be changed for a specific position. That's one question, and that would be, there's a vacancy that we haven't been able to fill because the salary is too low. But that just seems a level for the FAC that is too low or too granular, and thinking that for us, it would be, somehow making sure that there's a process in place for the creation of new positions on this. And as long as there's a process, not questioning it, I have no opinion on this document.
Thank you, Ross.
So this year, there are 3 changes. It's not very significant, but last year, there were major changes in the classification system, and it had very significant budget impacts. And I think that's the area where the FAC may want to be involved, just to opine on. So, for example, last year we created a whole executive scale for the departments that is separate. They used to be on the top of the scale for police, fire, or exempt, and whatever the non-represented, I think was the other category. Anyway, so I think it's good for this to become routine for the FAC to take a look. But I think Peter's right. There's no much juice for the squeeze for this year because not much is happening.
Thank you. Any further discussion on R1226? If not, I will entertain a motion from commission members on R1226.
I think we should not reserve a recommendation.
Disclaim an opinion is appropriate, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah. I'll
Yeah.
make a motion to make no recommendation on this document, if that's a proper motion
Noted.
to make in this instance.
Which is fine. Do I have a second on Mr. Vale's motion?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of no recommendation with regards to resolution R1226, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. R1226, no recommendation. Okay. Next item on the agenda, new business. Item D, the Maryland Open Meetings Act. I wanted to offer to commission members the opportunity to complete open meetings training. There's a link there to what the Open Meetings Act is and what the training is. It's an online tutorial. You go through, you read some documents, complete some questionnaires, and then obtain a certificate at the conclusion. This came up recently because our April meeting, the proper notification of the meeting agenda was not posted timely, and therefore we were in violation of the Open Meetings Act. So I would offer to commission members that have not completed open meetings training to pursue that. All right, moving on to the next item on the agenda, item 6, unfinished business. This will be a closed session. Madeline, we would like to close the meeting.
I'm not 100% certain, but I think you might have to take a motion for that.
I'll entertain a motion to close the session.
I'll make the motion to close the session.
Do we have to state a reason for why we're closing it? I think that's
My understanding and reading is no.
okay.
And I'll ask the Office of Law to confirm.
There were several.
Yeah,
Okay.
we do need a reason for why we're going to close it. Do we know what the reason is? Or-
The reasoning, Ms. Leonard, is for deliberation on the recommendations for this year's budget, and the recommendations that we intend to put in the letter to then deliver to the Finance Committee and the City Council.
I'm trying to see which exception. I don't have the things. Hold on. I mean, I think it could fall under there's sort of a financial one, but hold on, I got to turn my video off so I can find it. Because there is a specific checklist that we need to do that I'm pulling up right now. Hold on.
Thank you.
Let's see. Oh, this is the FAQ. Okay, sorry, I'm pulling up the meeting checklist now. Okay, so we did give reasonable advance notice on the agenda that it was closed. We arranged for the public to attend the open part. Someone is going to have to keep minutes during the closed session, or otherwise keep some form of the video streaming privately. All right, so let's see, make sure. Let's see what the list is. Nope. Let's see.
Would investment of public funds?
Yeah, yes, I was gonna say
Yes.
that's not, let's see. It's not collective bargaining. Yeah, so I would say either it's to consider the investment of public funds. I'm here, so if you need my advice, it would be to consult with counsel to obtain legal advice, but that doesn't sound like. So I would think that to consider the investment of public funds is your best option based on what you've given me, but I would need confirmation that you guys agree with that.
Ross?
So One question and then an observation. Does the vote to close the meeting have to be unanimous?
No, I don't believe
No.
so.
Because if it's just to do our deliberations on our recommendations, I frankly feel those should be public and should be on the record. I'm not clear what we would be talking about that is sensitive, that the public should not be able to see our deliberations. I
Understood.
mean, if we're going to be discussing the report of the fact to the city council, I think that should be definitely public discussion.
With regards to items that are not going to make it into the final report, that was the question that was proposed to me, was only have what is in the final report to be the consensus of the committee rather than the deliberations. So, all right, if there is no desire to create a closed session, then we will continue with budget discussion.
And I'll withdraw my motion.
Thank you. Okay, so with regards to unfinished business, the deliberations with regards to the FY27 operating budget, the FY27 capital improvement plan, I will open discussion for commission members.
Jim, is it appropriate for me to, at this point, tell you my conversation with the mayor yesterday?
Please go ahead.
So I was with the mayor on other business, but we had a break and we were talking about boards and commissions in general. But we did talk specifically about the fact, and we were talking about my performance as a fact member at the joint meeting with the finance committee, where I was getting into the details of the CIP. And the mayor said that he thought that the fact should have a higher level of involvement in discussing the budget. I'm not sure I agree with him, but in any event, it led to him making the comment that he would like the fact to start much earlier being involved with the budget, which is actually in our legislation, with the mayor himself as he's forming his annual budget, and that he would like that to be things at the level of some of the things that we've been talking about, like the structural deficit, the union negotiations, the budgeting process, the budgeting philosophy, things like that, things that we now have members of the FACT and Mr. Rubino and Mr. Vale, who, and of course yourself, Mr. Chair, that are well versed in budget matters, but at a much more higher plane, not should we spend money on peak ambulance or something like that, unless it really does rise to a high level. And with that in mind, I reviewed the past FACT letters with their recommendations to the council. And I can't find my second one. What did I do with it? Anyway, I think that one of the things I hope we have time this morning to talk about, or sometime, is the nature of the FACT transmittal. And I will say that my concern is that we point out the problem, like structural deficit year after year, but we don't make any recommendations about what should be done with that. And that's the substance of the conversation the mayor and I had. But I thought it was a good introduction to our deliberations for this year's presentation or discussion of the heck did I do with that? Anyway, that's my opening preamble.
Thank you. Thank you. Your earlier point about seeking greater, what was the word you used again?
The mayor wanted the fact to start earlier and to meet with him. What he actually said was give the facts preliminary ideas on the budget and including the CIP, and have some interaction with the mayor before we make the final fact recommendations. I think that could be extended to not just the mayor, certainly the mayor for the mayor's budget, but also the finance committee. So when you look at our enabling legislation, I think that really was what was in mind for the fact, was to have involvement and time to really have an impact on how the process develops.
Okay. I concur. I believe that when I saw the resolution on the budget timeline, the Financial Advisory Commission was not referred to in the budget timeline. Alderman Thorpe.
Yeah, I would just refine a little bit what Ross is saying, that and to try to give some philosophical thought to the role of the FAC. This is the first year I've really watched the FAC's engagement with the budget. And to be straightforward and looking at what the finance committee does, what Joel and the finance department does, I would, rather than the FAC being involved in the development of the budget, which would cause, in my opinion, some level of workload that would be questionable, is for the FAC to come out of this budget process with a letter to the mayor and saying, these are our observations of the development of the FY27 budget, and these are our recommendations, process, questions, goals, milestones for the development of the FY28 budget, and allow that to become your agenda for moving forward. My observation, and again, I've got an experience level of 1, and I notice Alderman Huntley just logged on, and so he's got twice as much experience as I do, and Ross has 437 times more experience than I do. But this group, just by its very title and by the legislation, is advisory in nature, not necessarily what the fees and the fines and the people, the details of the budget, but what is the process? What are the thresholds? What are the strategic elements? And I would think the FAC could have a really strong impact by developing a list of questions, challenges for the city to address through the year, specifically the next 6 months, as the staff begins to develop the budget. Both process as well as, do we have the right reserves? Do we have the right thresholds in our budget? And I would keep that at the strategic level. That's my thought on what Mr. Arnett just had to say.
Thank you. That's a great set of marching orders for the FAC moving forward. Joe, and then Alderman Huntley.
So yeah, I agree with Alderman Thorpe. I kind of envision, through our deliberations, we've had some ongoing themes. I think that many of the FAC members probably overlap, and I kind of envision, one, identifying those, and because we are advisory in capacity, I think if we had a recommended way to look at them and address them, I think I'd be fine to put in a letter to the mayor and the city council. And it's advisory. They can take it or leave it, but we can, I think, identify some of those trends, whether it's the structural surplus or, decoupling the timing of the collective bargaining agreement with the budget cycle. I think those are all good things to think about. And then our advisory capacity, I think we can incorporate that into a letter. And if either identify it, if we don't have a good solution, or if we think we have a consensus of a recommended different way to look at it or a possible way ahead, I think we put it in there. And then the mayor, city council could say, thanks for the input, we'll take it under advisement, because we are advisory in capacity. So I think we could provide those ideas and, combine our collective, thoughts of who's gone through this process so far. And a couple of us are relatively new to it. I think collect those into a letter to the mayor and the city council, and then see, with advisory, having gone through FY27, what do we think is a good way to approach 28? Over.
Thank you. Alderman Huntley, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, apologies for being late, guys. I'll join the chorus of agreeing with Alderman Thorpe, and I just want to add to it that I think the fundamental rub, which the Finance Committee runs into as well, is that it's a lot of hurry up and wait, and then rush. There's this, the mayor's team is developing the budget for 3.5 months before we ever see it. And then there's a timeline where, we were rushing to finish our report on Monday. That span between when we finish the hearings and when we turn in our report is super tight. And it's the same thing for the fact that to be impactful, there is that quick turnaround. So I think there's, on one level, we need to find a way to make sure that the scheduling just suits that really tight turnaround. Like, I think you did a good job with that, Mr. Cardillo, this year by having that additional meeting. Is that on Monday?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Ross Arnett was the recommended impetus for that.
Well, kudos to Mr. Arnett as well. So that's one side of it, is just making sure that the timing of FAC meetings suits that really quick timeline. And then the other, and I think this is a lot of what Joe was getting at, and Frank said some of it too, is to the extent that there are recommendations the FAC is going to make that can be determined totally outside of that process, like, is 15% the right level for our budget stabilization fund? Actually, I'm sorry, that's 3%. Is 15% the right level for our unallocated? That is the kind of thing that I think
right.
we could work on outside of that super tight, like, 6-day window of writing of a budget report.
Thank you. I have a couple of comments with regards to that. First, I can recirculate budget presentations that the finance department delivered to the FAC in previous years, which had all these items, the budget stabilization, the surplus allocation. All of this was provided with a summary document, and then the budget was literally walked step by step by the finance department. I think in the past 2 years, the FAC has not had that. And then secondly, with regards to the budget timeline, we approve our slate of meetings for the year, and then the resolution for the budget timeline comes out after. And please note that the budget timeline resolution came out of a FAC recommendation in previous years. There was no timeline that was voted on and approved. It was really at the mercy of the staff as to when everything would occur. But we are all in favor, I speak for the commission as a whole, we are all in favor of actively engaged in the process at an earlier stage. Ross.
So, in the last two transmittals from the FAC first of all, I think we do need to determine when the FAC is supposed to get its recommendations in. Yesterday, the mayor commented that the FAC was late. I think, Harry, you also made a comment. I always thought that the FAC was supposed to get his recommendations in time for the Finance Committee to take them in consideration in their report to the City Council, but I think that's ambiguous at this point. Last year, we had a new and 1-year only finance director, and I think a lot of things, the FAC got left out just because there were new people in the process. So I focus more on the FAC's report from May 9th of 2024. But in that we kept stressing two things. One, the continued structural deficit, which we plan for every year. So it's on the page that shows in the budget book That's actually page 14. I flipped right to it because it's my favorite page in the public budget book where we show revenue of 122 million, expenditures of 125. And we do that year after year. And that is the definition of a structural deficit. And the way that we remedy that is because we always overestimate expenditures. And so we have money left over in fund balance for one time only. And this year we brought forward $3.2 million of projected fund balance from the previous year in order to meet the budget code requirement that we offer a balanced budget. And then the following page 14, there's page 15 with all kinds of details about what's happening with those monies being brought forward. I think that it would be appropriate to let revenue set the level for expenditures, and that we tighten the way and I have talked with several of you, including Joel, that we tighten the way we budget. Mr. Rubino budgets for the Academy, a budget that's several times larger than our budget, and projects towards the end of the year to have maybe $1 million of fund balance, not $10 million. The tables that Peter developed, I think, are very illustrative when you go back to the audited data and you show budgeted versus actual. We're all over the map. The average is a $10 million over budgeting for expenditures, but the reality is the variance around that is quite severe and I think worrisome. So these are the kinds of things I think also, obviously, I personally agree with talking about the way we do the union negotiations, but I think the budget process and things like fund balance are the things that the fact is being relied on to provide some advice, if not expertise.
Thank you. Alderman Thorpe.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. And I don't want to speak for the Director of Finance, but I've had an opportunity to watch him over the last couple months. And my concern is the points that are just brought up by Mr. Arnett. If I was Mr. Polakal, my head would explode if you asked me to make those changes in the middle at this point, because he's in execution. And so this really goes to, and I'm starting to repeat myself, so I'll stop here shortly, but these points should be addressed for the FY28 budget. And then I think, Mr. Chairman, your point would be well taken about that creates your agenda for the year, and address some of these concerns. And then as Mr. Rubino said, you truly are then an advisory board where you're advising the mayor to look at these things in the FY28 as compared to if the mayor was to take these recommendations at this meeting right now, it would throw the budget process into tremendous turbulence, and I'm not sure we would be able to approve it in time. And so, I mean, just in summary, all points well taken, but longer than a couple weeks to work on for this budget.
Thank you.
That makes sense, Mr. Arnett?
Yeah. And in fact, I'll make an even stronger statement. I think that the letters from the FAC are relatively not understood by the vast majority of the city council. I wonder how many people, even in this meeting, can tell you what the structural deficit is for this year's budget. And I just said the number, but I don't know that most of the council understand the language in our letter. That's why, Peter, I was so excited about the tables you developed. The table really shows what the structural deficit is, and it shows its history. It does show its volatility as well, and I think that's need for caution. but I think that we're not really providing a full service with the points that we make year after year, literally, and are largely fall on deaf ears amongst council members who are the people that we were designed to help with their processes and their thinking. So I guess I am agreeing that we need to be focused on this coming year for the fact and the next budget. It strikes me that we try to do, without having the daily meetings, exactly the same thing that the finance committee is charged to do. And as you heard Mr. Alderman Huntley say, that they feel constrained in the amount of time, and they're doing this day in and day out, and we're doing it in 2 meetings. I just don't think that we can give much value added to the details of the budget or the fees, fines, class and comp. It's just not, even if we have the expertise, we don't have the time. And I frankly don't think we have the mandate to do that.
Thank you. I will add here that excuse me. With regards to the prior communications, whether they're acted upon or not, I would continue to emphasize that we should push these issues whether they are acted upon or not. Just to amplify the voice, I would continue to push for those. I don't know if that is achieved through a closer monitoring on a quarterly basis. I would ask FACT members, would they expect monitoring of performance against the budget on a quarterly basis, or is that better left to the finance committee? So there's go ahead, Peter.
That's a great point, Chairman Cardillo. I think I just wanted to add my observations as a new person this year, and again, not fully understanding my mandate, but there's a question of kicking the tires on a budget that's already developed versus providing a strategy on how the budget should be developed in line with a 3 to 5 year picture of, or strategic vision of, the mayor and the other elected individuals in the city. And for me, I would much rather be on the latter part of that curve, but also wanting to make sure that someone is kicking the tires in a oversight capacity, and I would think that would fall on the finance committee in general. And so what as we continue to have this meeting, I'm kind of writing down some of the items that I think we leave out of our letter of recommendations, and so in addition to the items that were on last year's letter and in the previous letter, can at what point in this meeting can we start talking about the recommendations that we want to deliver to the finance committee, and we can address maybe what the FAC wants to specifically do at
Great.
next month's meeting.
Thank you. With regards to my position where I sit, I'm prepared now. Ross, you have something to add?
Just one final harping, I guess I'm doing. That's why I was so avid about having the spending affordability projections, the looking out 5 years, and that is focused on potential revenue. But I think we also need to be looking out 5 years on the expenditure side. And I know, Jim, you agree with that because you've voiced that several times. But then the spending affordability model starts to fit with this high level, many years out kind of look in terms of what the city's facing. But also then we need to focus on the budget process, the structural deficit, things like the timeliness of union negotiations that impact so much of the budget. But those would be outwardly focused. I think for this year, we don't have much of a choice but to do the standard letter from the fact to the council. But I'm really arguing that when we move forward, we think about changing the way we do things.
Thank you.
Uh,
Go ahead,
Ch-
Joel.
At risk of perhaps creating the discussion and making it go further, I want to challenge the language of structural deficit a little bit for this group. I want folks to understand the numbers in a way that I'm seeing them and not just the way that they're presented on the page. So the number that people are referencing when they see structural deficit is the fact that there's a revenue number. Oh, Harry, are you?
Not disagreeing with you, Joel. I know where you're going, and I think I've got some addition after you finish. Keep going.
Okay, you scared me with your hand coming up and immediately as soon as I started talking. The first basis of what we do is establish a balanced budget. That is the number one first mandate. We can't proceed without creating a balanced budget. This notion that this is a structural deficit, I think, is a misnomer. What you see is that there's expenditures in excess of revenues because there is an acknowledgement that fund balance exists. And so there's expenditures of $125 million versus revenues of 122 million because there's an acknowledgement that there is a capital reserve and there is an acknowledgement that there is one-time use monies. And so there is an acknowledgement that we know there is access to funds from a prior year that can then be used, thereby actually balancing the budget further. And so you're using historically available cash. And so while it appears to be a negative budget, it's actually a net balanced budget because you're using previous cash that was there from the prior year. And so I just the term structural deficit keeps getting thrown around, but like if you didn't have any one-time funding, if you didn't have any capital reserve balance, you wouldn't dip into that. And so therefore you would adhere to your mandate of a balanced budget. So,
Yep.
I saw 3 hands come up, so maybe
I
at risk of
believe-
having created a
I believe that former city manager Teresa Sutherland explained it as the proper use of accumulated fund balances. And I would then add that with regards to what is a structural deficit? You're right. We could spend a lot of time discussing that, but I think the point here is, do we determine when you referred to the prior surplus, has that been acted upon in the manner that is compliant with the city charter as it relates to, say, the FY26 surplus that creates this fund balance? Has that been properly allocated in accordance with the formula? So I'll ask Alderman Huntley that question, and then he can add the additional discussion item.
Well, so to directly answer Mr. Cardillo's question, yes, it has been done in accordance with the city charter.
Thank you.
To Joel, absolutely agree with everything you just said, Joel. And I think it is confusing. While I totally agree with Alderman Arnett's underlying point that we budget too conservatively, I think saying structural deficit would be very confusing to the public. I think people understand that to mean the city is actually spending more than the city is actually bringing in. And that is not the case, because here's how I put it. Agree with everything Joel said, but I'm just tackling this from a different direction, which is to say, judge me on my ACFR, not on my budget. If you look at the ACFR, every year the city's net position has increased, at least for the past 8 years. I don't know about before that. And so to me, that says that just like you might do in your household, right? If you expect you're going to eat out 5 times a month or 5 times a week, and you actually only eat out twice a week, then really you're doing fine. Like you're doing, as long as there's more money in your bank account at the end of the week than at the beginning, or end of the month than at the beginning, consistently, you're doing all right. You wouldn't call that a structural deficit. So it's a matter of, we need to make sure that our budget aligns with how we're actually spending, but we should be judged on how we are actually spending. And the way that we are actually spending is not in a structural deficit.
But I just want to point, if, presentation wise, if you have fund balance, you are always going to have expenditures and excess of revenues as just a natural presentation structure. That's just what it is going to present always.
I guess the question is with regards to recurring revenue versus one-time revenue and recurring expenditures versus one-time expenditures. So if we address it within that context, do you see a deficit?
Within this current budget, do I see a deficit? I do not see a deficit within this budget, no.
So recurring revenues go to recurring expenditures. We do not have one-time funds to cover recurring expenditures.
Based on the budget that is prepared, no, we do not have. One-time funds are covering, fund balance is covering one-time fund usage, and recurring revenues are covering recurring expenditures. I believe I'm answering that correctly.
I understand the answer. I just want to ensure that commission members concur with that, and also finance committee members.
And I just because I had my hand up and I'll opine that, I what I see is a structural deficit on paper if you don't take into account cash balances. Joel already said that. Got it. When I look at the history of, of revenue, actual revenue into the city versus actual expenditures, I see fund balances growing, or whatever you would call a significant, single year forecast or a single year surplus, which aligns with what Alderman Huntley was saying, and I think some of this is a presentation question, like what are the ways that we could develop additional tables or additional reports that would better illustrate to the council, the city, every stakeholder in this process, what the actual position of the city is, which to me is relatively healthy. And then, from our conversation on Monday, but something that I've been thinking about for a while, was better language surrounding what is accomplished with any surplus that's generated in any given year, any cash surplus on the general fund. And so, there's a mathematical formula that, sets a budget reserve. There's a mathematical formula that splits the remainder, that the waterfall that Mr. Palakala was referencing. And what would be the appropriate, to me, what would be the appropriate amount of surplus left over from stabilization and capital reserve to then deploy on projects that the council, or the one-time use money, right, versus our debt load, right? In my general feeling is that, we shouldn't be taking on debt just because we have the ability to. And I was kind of concerned that, our projected debt issuances included an extra $15 million just because. I see on the capital spend side an underspend on capital projects that are planned and what's actually spent, which means that there almost doesn't seem to be a use for taking out or issuing more debt to even if plans on capital were authorized. There doesn't seem like that there's a capacity for that to get done in any fiscal year. So what I want a stronger look at, or something that the FAC can take on, is determining or suggesting, recommending exactly how much surplus, if our process is generally going to generate a surplus, because it looks like that's what occurs, that we appropriately allocate that money to the buckets of reserves, one-time projects, and principal pay down on our existing debt. That was a lot.
Thank you. No, I agree, but I do believe that is by statute determined. So I will look first to Alderman Hunley and then to Mr. Arnett.
Oh, sorry, my hand was not meant to be raised.
Okay, thank you.
So
Your
I'd like
earlier
to-
comment, Alderman Hunley, your earlier comment with regards to the proper allocation of the prior surplus. You believe that the Finance Committee has clear visibility on that? And that is according to formula?
Yes, I do feel that way.
Okay. Peter, do you have any questions with regard to that?
Just as a follow-up, I am sure that it is done to code and per the charter. I think what I didn't hear, and that's not because it's excluded. It might be excluded from the charter, that when do surplus funds pay down existing principal on existing debt? Because
the mayor's budget is the mayor's recommendation to the city of how to leverage the budget. And so if he allocates one-time funds for certain things, or capital reserve for certain things, that's what can be used for. Then it's up to city council to make recommendations. The debt capacity analysis that's performed by Davenport, our third party, analyzes our debt load. And so there is an analysis done of the debt load the city is taking on to evaluate saying that we should be at zero debt is probably the incorrect amount of debt, right? And so we have what is a third-party expert providing us some level of advice on you should be within this 10 to 12% target, or I shouldn't say target. The 10% is kind of like the first level breach, 11 is your midpoint, and 12 is your ceiling. And they've recommended that you really do want to be in that 10-ish% zone, because that's an appropriate level of usage of debt, because the city is so highly rated that you're getting debt at this 4 to 5% interest rate, which when you compare to see, inflation and other type things, is actually beneficial from the perspective of managing to cost increase. And so there is analysis done, and there's expert advice being provided in that capacity. And so we are managing to that part of our portion. And so to say that we should just redirect one-time funds to principal pay down would be a good discussion, but a discussion nonetheless against the debt capacity analysis that's already being performed and the debt analysis that's being performed. And so I would encourage the FAC to do that when we have the debt discussion with Davenport, right? Like as part of that component. But to say that like we should just out of the gate have the mayor's budget be taking one-time money as like the first protocol, that's a discussion that the FAC could be. It's like maybe like you're saying that the waterfall goes capital reserve, one-time funds, and you were saying maybe add a third bucket for principal pay down. I think that that's entirely, maybe it's not. I'd have to look to Ashley if it's within the facts ability to make that recommendation of policy change. But I think like that can be brought to the table, or maybe a councilman can bring that to the table. But I do think I just want to make sure to make sure to reiterate that we do have a debt expert services firm that is providing advice there.
Mr. Palakal, I don't disagree, and I know that we're working within the restrictions or the constrictions of having, you know, debt ratings made against the city. I think this is I have a philosophical position in general that debt creates interest, and interest is money that could be spent on other things. And so, you know, when we talk about, you know, the amount of debt that you take out also has to be tethered to the capital plan, you know, because we're, you know, we're paying up front for facilities or vehicles or something that we're going to get useful life out of for many years. So it's not a lack of desire to have debt. It's just making sure, again, which I think is kind of part of what I would believe our mandate is, again, is to recommend, you know, some capital plan or level of capital plan that's tethered to, you know, the current assets of the city, the revenue projections, you know, and the amount that the city can take on. I mean, if I said that, you know, for other organizations that I work for, you know, 3% of sales was what our capital budget was going to be, and that was somewhat related to our depreciation expense and our fixed asset load. That, you know, what I don't see is some sort of benchmark or some sort of target like that by the city. And just from an outsider's perspective, for the first time, saying, you know, if our current level of depreciation is X, you know, what is an appropriate spend per year that lines up with keeping our assets in a state of good repair, versus just throwing $30 million out there.
So I think your point's well taken, and I do think refinement could definitely be welcomed by the city to think about it from a different lens or different perspective. But there is a basis right now in terms of managing to the capital improvement program, which is the debt capacity today is at 1% of general fund expenditures and so then that informs your debt load, which then informs how much you can express up to, which then informs how much you can spend. So like there is actually some basis to what the city is able to like expend up to today, but using the debt. And I hear what you're saying. And so I think like the consideration to go a different way or use some different metric to inform that, totally valid and something that the city should consider. But I just want to make sure that you know that there is something driving some sort of like ceiling or some sort of limitation towards the capital improvement plan.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I think it's just we're speaking the same thing, but just different ways of approaching it, and then recognizing that all of this is based on the ability to generate revenues based on the property tax values of the city and the services that it provides, right? So I mean, you know, the ultimate answer is, are we perhaps taxing the population too much for the acceleration of capital spend? And does it need to be a 25-year timeline or a 35-year timeline? And if that happens, then there could be the ability to not tax the populace as much, right? And so like all of these things tie in this in the circular logic of, you know, how much do we want our citizens to pay for the capital improvements they want to make in any given year, and then talking about the expenses too, right? It's all tied together.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Ross.
So I want to speak to, I have a different point, but I want to speak to this. I question whether one-time only money can be used for PAYGO because it's one time only. But even if you can do that legally, how it would work, because that would mean you would find this new bolus of one-time only money, And so you use that instead of money that was issued by bonds in the current year, which really creates all kinds of effects of bond monies being rippled down to other years. But I think I want to go back to this whole.
Can I just head up? Can I head off your comment about the one-time money?
Sure.
We're not using one-time money for PAYGO. I don't believe we're using capital reserve money for PAYGO.
Right.
Does
And
that
the
help
capital
clarify?
reserve is funded, if you look at page 15, by the one-time only money. We're putting
No,
No.
capital
No.
reserve is a separate
1.4 million of one-time only money into the capital reserve fund.
capital reserve money. Capital reserve is a separate bucket from one-time money, and so capital reserve can be leveraged for
Yep.
PAYGO.
Both
That's-
are parts of the fund balance, but I think the reasoning specifically behind that, and I'd actually maybe argue we could use one-time only money for PAYGO, but we're not. And I think one of the reasons why you have the capital reserve set up in the way that it is to make sure that you don't have some insane amount of fund balance, which is in this case the capital reserve part of the fund balance, going to create all these new projects that are then later going to cause maintenance needs. And so, but Joel's totally right. There is not one-time reserve for one-time use money getting spent on capital projects. Period. Full stop.
Peter was suggesting that we use the one-time only money for PAYGO as opposed to issuing more bonds. If I understood him correctly, maybe
Peter was suggesting adding a third categorization in the waterfall to pay down.
Yeah.
Well, so here's what I would like to go back to, and it's this thing that Jim, you're correct. Teresa Sutherland introduced this. We didn't have this prior to her, but if we actually did our expenditures based on for the general fund based on $122 million, because we didn't intentionally create all of this excess fund balance year to year and carry it over, I would suggest that the budget for expenditures would be much tighter. And that's really where I would like to start. Instead of having us calculate the expenditures we're going to make based largely on union agreements for salaries and benefits and pensions and cost of living increase and coming up with expenditures and then finding a way to make revenues meet that with this device of adding $3.2 million, I would suggest we might want to start with our expected revenues and let that drive what our expenditures can be. And really drive down. I mean, when you look at the tables that from the audited data that Peter represented, we're talking about huge amounts of money every year. I don't know how many people have that or remember that, but I did send it to everyone. We're every year we're having all of this extra money that we carry forward into the next year, and then we use it as this device to bring unexpended monies up from which were expenditures in the previous year and now are becoming revenues in the current year. And I would think that if we let the revenues drive the expenditures, we could eliminate a lot of that extra funding. We have protection both in the required reserves for all of the funds, 15% for the general fund, and the budget stabilization fund, and the capital reserve fund. I mean, it could be that we could have a very surprising year where police fill all of their slots or revenue for income tax really is much bigger than we anticipated, whatever it is. But that's why we have all these reserves, and we have the budget stabilization fund and the capital reserve fund. So it feels to me like we need to have a fundamental change in the philosophy of how we budget. And that's coming from not an accountant or a finance person, that's coming from an economist. But it just seems like we create this excess reserve year after year after year, excess funds, fund balance, and then carry it forward to finance an overly conservative estimate of expenditures that we know year after year are not occurring. Boy, did
Thank
that
you.
kill the conversation.
Thank you. No, I appreciate the healthy dialogue. I think we all do. Turning to the FAC recommendations, we can start with, you know, what items we want to put in the content of the letter here. I have no problem with discussing that openly. As Ross Arnett said, we might as well proceed. So I will open the floor to FAC members to include items in the report.
Oh,
Go ahead, Peter.
so
Peter,
I was just going to provide a suggestion
Very
that
well.
since every year we seem to be providing similar language, that we could use last year's letter, and just briefly, you know, kind of go through the items addressed in that and say, you know, are these something that we want to include or
Does it still
exclude?
apply? That's okay.
And then we can proceed to the things that are not on the list that we want to perhaps provide a recommendation for.
Noted. Great point.
And I have it up, so I can
Very well.
I can start. So in the previous two letters, we've always suggested that the FAC get involved at an earlier point in the discussion, whether it's insufficient time or insufficient information presented. So, you know, the question to the rest of the FAC members is, you know, is that language?
I agree. Still valid.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, we can reiterate it again.
Yeah.
Make it a meaningful part of the budget timeline. The budget timeline, while high level in nature, should still provide details with regards to timing and participants.
And Mr. Cardillo, can you make sure that the FAC has copies of budget presentations that might have been shared with the FAC in previous years? Because I never received anything, but I do think one of the most helpful items that I received was the presentation from the working session with the finance committee earlier. But I think if I'm kicking the tires on a budget that's already been presented and looking at highs and lows on an operating statement, that I don't see like the driver based detail that I would kind of want. And so, but I don't know if that's in your presentation. So if it's just simply, please reference these presentations from prior years as the level of information that we'd want.
Noted. I will provide that. Yes.
Okay. All right.
I would also suggest we use the document. This was provided for the first time to the FAC, and I am happy to see this, the council member budget priorities, because again, one of the charging missions of the FAC is to advise the mayor and council. So I would like to opine on the budget priorities, whether we concur or not concur with each of the council members on their budget priorities. So I would add that as a piece as well.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much for circulating that, Joel. That was very helpful.
All right. And we did have
Peter, would you mind if I jump in briefly on that last point? I just wanted to say to Jim, I think that's a really good example where you could do that before we get into the heat of the budget season, right? The council members present those priorities in January, December. And so the FAC meeting in January or in February, way before we get into this crunch, could talk about those. So that's a great way to break things up.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, that was the first time I circulated to FAC members. But yeah, if that's prepared, in the January timeframe, that does provide meaningful input from the FAC at an earlier stage in the process. So thank you. I concur. Back to you, Peter.
All right. The next piece was talking about a structural deficit, and I think that we've had a lot of discussion on that. We'll have to be circulating a draft among the FAC members to review at any level. I think we'll see how that comes out. But for me, there's, whether it's a structural deficit presented on paper for the budget, or it's acknowledging an actual realized surplus. I think that there's a disconnect between, how we present the budget to say that there's a structural deficit, but then not acknowledging an actual surplus at the end of every year.
Okay, I agree.
Okay. And then proceeding into analysis and recommendations, and again, these are things that we've reviewed and talked about for the past 4 years at least, I think. So the first is talking about the language that talks about limited revenue enhancements, and I think trying to figure out ways to put a cap and floor on expense increases, and I don't see anything significantly wrong with that language, and I don't know, does everyone have this letter in front of them at the moment?
Yes.
And I think that's a general comment to me, or just a general, let's keep an eye on the prize in terms of limited revenue capacity to pay for increased services. And
Peter, can I jump back though? Because I think Joel raised a very good point, and I have long struggled with structural deficit versus the designed excess of fund balance in each year. So I do think we need to spend a little bit more time focusing on what is a structural deficit by definition, and then what is it that we're the FAC calling a structural deficit, because I think we're calling the structural deficit the thing that shows up in the table in the budget year after year. But I got the sense, Joel, that you're not agreeing that that's really a structural deficit.
Yeah. Based on how that's exactly presented, it's not. Now, there's got to be detailed work that happens to understand where all the revenue sources are, to your point, Mr. Arnett. There are revenue sources that are transfers into the general fund, such as overhead transfers, that are possibly items that could be considered administrative in nature and therefore not like true revenue sources, which could be also up for discussion, right? And so you would want to unveil, I'm just saying this more from a capacity of just like understanding the components of the sources of the revenues to see truly is the business generating the requisite property taxes and other income sources for the general fund to meet general fund obligations, and not generating transfer type revenues to then meet it or otherwise.
Yep.
As well.
Okay.
So
for clarity, the letter written last year says that the FY26 budget does not contain a structural deficit, but we caution that we want to prevent future structural deficits, which was intended to color the discussion as to for multi-year planning, and the discussion that we've had multiple times about a forward-looking forecasting function. So go ahead, Peter.
Jim, if last year's budget, I have the budget book, I can pull it up, shows exactly the same table that I keep harping on, where revenues are not equal to expenditures unless we make this adjustment. And so I don't know why the letter would have said there wasn't a structural deficit if it's being defined by that number that is always added to revenues to bring it up to expenditures.
Probably because the ACFR keeps showing that our net position is increasing.
Thank you. Yes,
Well, yes.
yes,
And that's
yes, the
because of
ACFR is the
we
Bible,
budget.
and yes. Joe,
Sorry, I was just going to say it's a little bit like an eye of the beholder kind of thing. I think on paper, when you look at the budget, it looks like there's a deficit, but we all know it's budgeted such that if you look back at the ACFR, there's going to be a surplus. So it's a little eye of the beholder. And to carry Alderman Huntley's analogy earlier, we talk about programming like 10 months. If we plan your home budget to go out to dinner 10 nights a month, knowing you're only going to go out 5, and at the end of the year, you say, hey, we saved a lot of money. It's like, well, maybe not. Depends on which way you're looking at it, right?
Exactly.
right, and it's all proved out in the ACFR. All right, go ahead, Peter.
All right. So, and again, I'm just trying to figure out what we copy and paste and what we might not want to change or need to change. Because items 2, 3, and 4 are saying that, you know, with a known kind of revenue income over the next 3 years, you know, we have to keep an eye on the big rocks, and the big rocks are salaries, wages, and benefits, which are 60 to 70% of the city's spend every year, and that we need to be restrained in keeping those personnel costs in check. This just seems like, you know, a standard keep an eye on the prize language, and not that I suggest taking it out, but you know, just are there any changes before we talk about the union negotiation bargaining piece? Does anyone have any significant changes to that language?
No, I think the C&B compensation and benefits and total personnel costs.
Yep.
Again, is still the lion's share of the budget. I don't know if 67% is still applicable for this budget cycle. Joel, do you have a metric on that? Total GFE and
Sorry, can you just repeat the question? I didn't hear the
Sorry.
percentages.
It's the personnel costs as a percentage of total GFE.
Also, Joe, I don't have it on the top of my head.
Okay.
I
It's
believe
somewhere
it was,
between 65 and 70. Would
yeah,
you
I
be
believe it
comfortable
was
in that?
70, I think sounds accurate.
Okay. In the prior year, it was 67. So as that number increases,
Yeah, so you have
that
to
is still a
resolve
point of
itself.
concern. If it is 7 or greater, then we are still trending up.
And should pensions be included in that as well as salaries and benefits?
The pension is a benefit.
Yeah. All right, well, so in the briefing.
There's both. I think, Russ, what you're talking about is the pay down of previous pension expenses, right?
The current funding of the pension, yes, but the unfunded liability has not been part of the GFE, if I'm right. Is that right, Joel?
Don't actually know that answer. I'll have to come back to you.
Okay.
The
So
unfunded pension.
When you book the unfunded liability on the pension, is that a general fund expenditure?
Mr. Doyle, can you take that as a question to come back to the FAC on?
Jim, I think the way I'd answer that is the total unfunded liability is not part of our general fund expenditures, right? That's sort of a
Thank you. Thank you.
position, not a cash flow thing. But
Correct.
but we are paying down that unfunded liability, and that is part of the finance. It shows up as part of the finance department's budget.
Thank you. Thank you. So that is a GFE component, pension, Ross.
Yeah. And I don't think it would show up as salaries and benefits. But also I think that's appropriate, right? Like if we're trying to see how the city's salaries and benefits are growing as a percentage, we wouldn't want to consider that, right? Because that's not going to be growing, but we're paying it down.
But is the outlay still treated as a personnel cost? You're saying no.
I'm saying no. Yeah, that pay down,
Right,
I
if
believe
that's
it's
the
not getting
determination.
treated that way.
Yeah, I'm not asking whether it's appropriate or not. The just for comparison purposes, apples to apples, year over year, the that piece is not part of personnel costs as it relates to total GFE. Thank you. Okay,
Okay.
moving ahead, Peter. Thank you.
Yeah. So number five, and just as a point, we have 8 minutes until 10 a.m. So I'm not sure what our expectations are in terms of going past that time.
I'd like to wrap up.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily. Yeah, let's just proceed.
Okay. So for the collective bargaining, I know that this has been discussions that we've had over the last 3 meetings. We say that we'd like a FAC member to be present as an observer and consultant to the city during the process. But I believe that Mr. Arnett, you have other specific recommendations. I have some language proposals, but so Mr. Arnett, do you want to start on exactly
Well,
how
yes.
you want that to change?
So
How
I
we
do-
refine that collective bargaining recommendation. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so I do believe that we still should urge to have a FAC member. I agree with Attorney Leonard's notion that that has to be agreed to by both bargaining parties, the unions and the administration. But what I offered in my bullet points, and I changed it to text and sent it to all of you last night, is that we really need to consider this problem we have where the unions don't complete their negotiations in time to get into the mayor's budget and the city budget. And I make a recommendation that there could be 2 different processes that could be involved. Either we agree in binding agreement with the unions that we will come to an agreement prior to the mayor needing it for the budget, or that we carry forward the current year's budget for salaries and benefits into the next year. And you should have that in your email, that language.
Yes, thank you.
I actually just
Yeah,
want to make
well-
sure that it's stated in the meeting, honestly. So.
Great. No,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, and so it's refining the inclusion of potential union negotiation outcomes within the budget, and it's either have it agreed before the budget or leave it out.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of legal and fair labor processes that would have to be vetted with the Office of Law and with HR and so on and so forth. But every year in the past process with the union negotiations, we have an earmark for resolving the union negotiations. And it's kind of like, yeah, I'll take that as a union member, and then we'll move on to get more. So it's just not it's not a proper balance, and particularly not given our duty of good faith to our residents and taxpayers, businesses and residents.
Thank you.
For me and from prior experience, what I have don't see in this process is some sort of objective or scenario generation that would be the position of the city manager, and I'm not necessarily sure if I need to see that. It might exist, but just acknowledging that I would want to know what the city's position is in terms of an appetite for potential increases or not. And so like my first recommendation would be to have that circulated to the FAC, but I actually am more worried about making sure that it exists. And then when it comes to having a member observe and consult. I think I'd want to change the language that says consult as during, meaning actually a postmortem recommendation or postmortem report to be delivered to the council later, so that we aren't providing, to make it clear in the language, that we aren't providing consultation on what the manager is negotiating, what the city manager is negotiating with the union, but just that, we're evaluating the process in terms of the desired objectives and the actual outcome.
Yeah.
Okay,
Agree. I agree.
good point.
I think that the problem in the past is these negotiations are so closely held. In fact, I don't believe that that I can recall the administration sharing with the council what their negotiation objectives were. I might have missed that day in class, but and that's because it's a negotiation. Neither side wants to give a tell about what they're willing to give and not give.
All right, so we continue to see clarity regarding the factual and the collective bargaining process.
All
Thank you.
right. Item number 6, urgently recommending transitioning from budgeting focused on a line item incremental approach to a more performance-based budgeting model. And I think, as I interpret this is saying bottoms up is fine, but we need a top-down strategic direction to
Correct.
evaluate how that bottom-up approach is generated.
Correct. And I think part of that comes out of this budget priorities that the council members develop. That's a piece of it.
Well, that has to be dramatically improved, as I think all agree.
Correct.
But for 1 year, we did do performance-based budgeting, and that was not very successful. But I still think it's the right thing to do.
Okay.
And in that, and actually both that item number 6 and item number 7, to me, unless I'm missing something, are fairly much saying the same thing, is just, forest for the trees. And I'm absolutely fine keeping that language and
Correct. And I think that's because a top-down focus allows the FAC to address the high-level priorities rather than, is this line appropriate? Is this line appropriate?
Yeah.
So it engages the FAC at the advisory level on budget priorities and action items. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Pollock. Oh, sorry.
Joel, go ahead.
Sorry, I just have another conflict at 10 a.m. and so I do need to drop.
Right. Well, thank you very much. Thank
Thank
you for your continued efforts. And
Thank you very
we look
much.
forward to working with Sean.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Go ahead, Peter.
Okay. So at this point, we've kind of addressed the items that were on the letter from last year and potential revisions to them. And
Thank
so now to segue into new items that the FAC would like to add to this letter.
Yes. So I'll turn to Ross because Ross had circulated some thoughts on what to include. Ross, do you want to include these by reference in the report?
Well, I offered them for the FAC's consideration. I think that the budget negotiating process and the union negotiating process and the budget process are covered really and have been for years in the letter from the FAC. I don't know whether we want to go on and make some recommendations. I think that one of the things that the mayor said yesterday, and we've talked about today, is the fact continuing to be engaged in budget considerations throughout the year and engage in discussions with the mayor and with the council about those kinds of things like the budget process and the negotiating process. I do think that today we've really come up with some ambiguity about what we mean by structural deficit. And I think that's what I was attempting to get at in my discussion about the fund balance. I am still very uncomfortable with the fund balance. It seems to me we are intentionally carrying forward $4.6 million into fiscal 28 as sort of a phantom budget stabilization. I mean, if we have another surplus of $10 million in 27, and in addition, now we have this 4.6, it just seems to me that we're accumulating a huge amount of fund balance and carrying it over and over. And I think that could be used for more constructive purposes, pay-go, or a property tax rate reduction. And I'd make arguments in my comments that the property tax is driving people out of the city. And it's also affecting people on fixed incomes that can't continue to pay an increase in their property tax. And businesses are also affected by these property taxes. So being sort of cavalier that, well, we're not increasing the tax rate when we know we're increasing the tax burden year after year, when we might not necessarily have to do that if we change the way our budget was processed. So anyway, as far as these other things, I think they're too in the weeds, the police budget development, the fire budget, and then I worry about seeing tables in the future about parking revenue by parking lot, but I'm not sure that that's I'm kind of arguing against myself there that the fact is could be getting too much in the weeds as opposed to higher level. So, and then all of my comments on the CIP are very definitely specific to the CIP, which I think is the charge given to the back to review it, but then it doesn't seem that it's appreciated when at least one fact member has specific comments on the capital budget. So yeah, I don't know how to handle that. I once again, I've stunned everybody.
So I think from my opinion, and it's just an opinion,
Please.
is that the the level that I want to provide recommendations is probably above the specific project level or specific department activity level. And except of course where it comes to union negotiations, right? So which is part of our mandate, I believe. The question then becomes, how can you take the items that you address and bring them one level up to say, what is it that we're asking the city to do next year in its budgeting process when it comes to reviewing capital projects?
And I think you said it well when you talked about the whole of our bond issuance. And I mean, we're talking about $501 million worth of bonds of bonded projects over 5 years. I think if the average citizen knew that that's the kind of debt level we were taking on, I think they would first be freaked and then they would say, what, do we need all of this? I mean, so I don't think there's ever been much restraint in our whole capital investment. And whenever an alderman wants a project, sure, we'll put it in the CIP. And whenever the department wants a project, we'll put it in the CIP. That's why I noted that a good chunk of the budget in my last note there was just looking at water and sewer and stormwater management and so forth. The things that, I mean, that's a healthy part of the budget. I forget what the exact total I came up with, but those things are a good chunk of the $500 million. But I think those are the things that people expect the city to do. They expect water and sewer and stormwater management and resiliency things. I'm not sure how much they respect the other 100 some odd items in the CIP. I'm sure each individual person that's affected by the CIP on Barbud Lane thinks it's a good idea. 129 different CIP projects over 5 years. I mean, that's a hell of a load. And Peter, you said it earlier, there's no way we can carry that out. We keep issuing bonds, but not getting the projects done. So
That was just my observation in the numbers, not necessarily
I know,
a
it's
reflection
been-
on the city's ability to
well, it
hold
came
to get
up. It came up in the discussion of roads and sidewalks, where the director, Public Works Director, said, we're not going to spend as much money on roads this year because we're behind in our schedule. And we're behind in our schedule because we only use one contractor. We could keep up the schedule of road resurfacing, which is a huge political issue as well as life safety issue, if we changed our process, or we need to revamp our expectations for the quality of our streets, having them be repaved every 30 years, not every 20 years. But anyway, I mean, it seems to me like there should be a dialogue with the fact in the finance committee at least, but I'm not sure I think I agree, they're too granular to go into the report, except as a general observation.
Okay,
So I would
we'll
say,
include a comment with regards to coordination with finance committee on priorities.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, every meeting I go and I ask them, do we have any items to consider? So the continued coordination with the finance committee on priorities
Yeah.
is still a valid recommendation. Thank you.
So when it comes to the capital side, I think I said it a little bit earlier, but I think that I would want to include something as a recommendation to further refine, you know, how over a 3 to 5 year period we can link or tether capital spend against some sort of reserve study, which I don't exactly know what exists and what's out there to kind of set the floor of what money has to be spent in order to keep assets in good repair. But then also on a ceiling side, that is somehow some percentage of, you know, annual revenue or some percent of, you know, our total expected fund. Something that says, you know, that any stakeholder or any tax-paying person or any person who's receiving city services has a sense of whether or not a number proposed is a good number. And I think there's a lot of fluctuation when I looked at the 5-year plan from 28 million to 17 million to 25 million. And I know that it's made up of individual projects. The question is, how many of those are essential and how many of those are not?
need versus want.
Yeah.
And so we characterize in the letter what versus why. I think need versus want. And I tried to do a little bit of that when I went through project by project. I don't think there's a bad project in there, but is it essential? And I don't, and there is a review that is conducted by Public Works of all of these projects, and they have criteria, and it used to be that the finance committee was involved in that process. It hadn't happened the last few years, and I'm not sure it happened this year either. But that's the time to question the want versus need kind of validity for these projects. Some of them have life safety criteria, and a lot of them have other state requirements for the conditions of the road or the nature of the buses and so forth. But that is really a very much within closed doors kind of a process, and yet it's leveraging a huge amount of money.
Thank you.
So yeah, so thanks, Ross. As I draft something, I think I'm and we'll probably have to circulate it amongst the group.
Yeah.
But just to say further refinement on the prioritization of capital projects and establishing, you know, some sort of guidelines giving the city's capacity to financially absorb it. You know, like there doesn't appear to me to be like a ceiling, a 5-year ceiling on spend.
Yeah, no, there is not.
Or a by year.
Well, the only thing is Joel was mentioning it, the stuff we get from Davenport, but there's two different criteria. One is a percent of our taxable base, and the other is that 10 to 12% band. But that band is so ridiculous because the band changes every year, goes up when we spend more. It's based on
It's based on the GFE. It's a percentage of GFE,
Yeah.
and the GFE continues to increase.
What does
that
GFE
capacity
stand
increase.
for? What is
General fund expenditures.
Oh, okay. Well, it's general fund plus parking plus transportation. So
Right,
I mean,
but
it's a huge number. And every time we increase our spending by 13%, we increase our band for issuing bonds. So
That
it's
capacity. Yeah, your debt capacity continues to expand as you grow your expenses, not your revenue.
right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent way to put it, Jim. It's based on spending rather than on revenue, and revenue is what pays for those bonds.
Yeah, I'm just parroting what Peter said earlier about, you know, capital expenditures, 3% of sales. It's just an extension of what Peter raised earlier.
Yeah. Mr. Rubino, I mean, I know that you're on mute. You know, as we're talking about things to add, do you have anything that you'd like? Not to put, I mean, I am putting you on the spot, but I just want to make sure
That's
that you're
fine.
included.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I ducked out there for a minute or two.
Thank you, yeah.
I'm still earning your tax dollars, and my boss grabbed me by the collar there for a minute. But
Understood. No, thank you, Terry.
you all hit on all the high things, and it was on, you know, I had kind of those big bullet points, overarching policy and process kinds of things that we'd all shared as we're chewing on this. And you guys hit on all those. I think as we tease out the words, I wouldn't mind putting, to the extent we can, some specifics, like when we talk about, you know, in last year's letter, we talked about the fact being involved earlier. We all say what earlier means, like when we should be involved in, and when maybe give the city council and the mayor a notional timeline, a little bit more specific. I think we were a little bit broad in our recommendations, and I think that'll tease out naturally as we work together to iterate on kind of a draft. I think that'll naturally flesh out. So I think you guys hit the high stuff, and I think we can tease out the details as we write this over.
Okay, so yeah, to provide a little granularity regarding that, it would be that next year's budget resolution timeline, we would like to be part of the referral, that should be referred to the FAC, and then we would be able to incorporate our timeline into that. So that's the tactical. The strategic is early involvement. The tactical is get the resolution to run through the FAC.
Mr. Doyle, are you available for a quick question?
Yes, sir.
I think on Monday, Joel referenced numbers preliminarily being assembled in December. When is the kind of like the first cut made
for the budget? So that would be ideal. It's been delayed in the past because the audit gets delayed, so you don't have the previous year's numbers. So this year, that's what Karen and I's focus has been preparing the finance team to get a more timely close so that we can get. But that's the ideal situation.
The ideal state is December. Okay, that was it. I was just
The audit is due at the end of the year. We've just gotten extensions in the past, so our goal is to make that due date.
okay.
Correct. In the past, the ACFR had been completed in mid to late February, and therefore the prior year actuals could be populated into budget worksheets and tables.
And there's always been a problem getting the ACFR done in time, and it's supposed to be done in December, but in February was a golden achievement because it's usually very late, and that and the union negotiations are two huge unknowns when the mayor has to strike his budget.
Agreed. Okay, I have tax commission members' time far beyond what I would ask. I think that we have a path forward with our recommendations for this year. Unless I would take a motion to close discussion on this, or if if anyone seeks to continue.
One last
Go ahead.
comment to
Go ahead,
follow
Ross,
up on
please.
Joe's point. Whenever we're nebulous, we should meet more instead of having a more specific, like we should meet in May or something like that. It's so easy to sort of brush off the fact report because everybody's busy. We're busy, but the finance committee and the city council and the staff are all busy. So to the extent that we can be more specific about, we should be meeting earlier.
Right. Now, our meeting calendar is voted on at the December meeting. And that is right around the same time as the budget timeline resolution. So those two things will dovetail into how we plan our meetings for the upcoming calendar year.
Okay.
I'm fine closing the
Okay.
discussion on this
Okay.
item. Not that I'm only one of four, so
Thank you.
all right. Which I think that also calls for. I'm going to take the inputs, and I think Mr. Cardillo, I said I would take a stab at drafting the first letter.
Thank you.
To circulate with proposed changes, and maybe I'll work with you, Mr. Arnett, and Mr. Rubino to kind of talk about how we want to treat that term structural deficit, which yeah. So that's on me. So on that, and I know that we have a deadline of Monday to get that out, I believe.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. So commission members should be able to weigh in on the draft as it develops.
Yep. So and I'll send that out to make sure that happens. So I think at this point, I'm guessing Mr. Cardillo is going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
Just two administrative items. As you said, the report is due Monday, May 18th, and we will work towards that. And our next regularly scheduled meeting is Thursday, June 11th. And I will inform commission members in advance of that, the content of that meeting. So that's all administratively. And now I'll entertain the motion.
So move.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank
Second.
you.
All right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Signify by saying aye. Aye.
No.
Thank you all.
I don't want to adjourn.
Okay, Ross, thank you. You may remain. Thank you.